In a small, cozy village nestled between snow-capped mountains, a young German shepherd pup named Max and his human sister, Lily, shared an inseparable bond. Max was only a few months old, still growing into his large paws, but already his loyalty to Lily was unwavering. The two had been inseparable since the moment Lily's parents brought Max home, the tiny pup's eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. Lily, only 8 years old at the time, had immediately taken to the little furball, showering him with love and affection. Max would follow her everywhere, whether she was playing in the garden or reading books inside their warm home. Every morning, Max's tail would wag furiously as Lily slid out of bed and skipped down the stairs, eager to start their day together. He would jump up to meet her, his small frame almost knocking her over as they greeted one another with a burst of energy. In return, Lily would laugh and scoop him into her arms, pressing her face into his soft fur. Their bond felt like something out of a storybook, one of pure, simple love. And Max, though still young and learning the world around him, was already beginning to understand the role he had in Lily's life. He wasn't just her playful companion, he was her protector. Even in the early days, Max had an instinctive awareness of Lily's emotions, picking up on her slightest changes in mood. If she was sad, Max would curl up beside her, resting his head on her lap, offering silent comfort. If she was happy, Max would bounce around her, encouraging her to play and explore. His presence in her life had become a constant, a reassuring presence that made everything feel just a little safer. On the coldest days of winter, when the snow fell thick and fast, Max would curl up with Lily by the fireplace, his warm body providing her with a sense of security that nothing else could. The crackling fire would light up the room, casting flickering shadows against the walls, but inside, there was nothing but peace. Max would lie at her feet, and sometimes, if she was feeling particularly brave, she'd lean down to play with his ears or rub his belly, causing him to wag his tail even more energetically. The bond they shared wasn't just about playfulness and companionship, it was about a deeper connection, one built on trust and mutual care. For Lily, Max was more than just a puppy. He was her friend, her confidant, and her protector. And for Max, Lily was his entire world. He had no words to express his feelings, but in the way he looked at her with those bright, trusting eyes, he made it clear that he would always stand by her, no matter what. Though Max was still learning and growing, one thing was certain. He already understood the importance of loyalty and love. As the winter days grew colder and the nights longer, their bond would soon be tested in ways neither of them could ever have imagined. Little did they know, the most dangerous blizzard the village had seen in years was about to hit, and Max would prove just how far he would go to protect the one he loved most. The day began like any other winter day in the village. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the gray sky, covering the rooftops and tree branches in a sparkling white coat. Max and Lily spent the morning building a snowman in their backyard, laughing as Max barked and pounced around in the fresh snow. Even though the air was crisp and the wind carried a biting chill, the world outside still felt gentle, almost magical. By midday, however, the sky darkened into a deep, heavy gray. The snowflakes grew thicker, falling faster, swirling into little storms of their own. The villagers, long familiar with the ways of mountain weather, hurried about, securing windows, stocking firewood, and gathering supplies. Max sat by the front window, his ears perked and his body tense, watching the world change before his very eyes. Even Lily, who usually loved snowstorms, grew quiet as the wind began to howl against the house, rattling the shutters and causing the old trees to groan. Inside the house, Lily's parents worked quickly, lighting extra candles and laying thick blankets in every room. They checked the pantry, made sure the heaters were working, and filled thermoses with hot tea and cocoa. The television flickered with warnings from the village authorities, advising everyone to stay indoors and prepare for an intense blizzard unlike any they had seen in years. As evening crept in, the snow outside piled higher and higher. The streets disappeared under a sea of white, and the familiar landmarks of the village, the post office, the bakery, even the small park where Lily and Max loved to play, vanished under the snowdrifts. Max whined softly, uneasy with the changes. He could sense the tension in the air, not just from the storm, but from the way Lily's parents moved quickly and spoke in hushed tones. When the power finally went out, the house plunged into darkness. Max pressed himself closer to Lily, his body warm against her legs. Her small hand found his fur and gripped it tightly. The only light came from the fireplace, its flames flickering and casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The wind outside roared louder, shaking the windows in their frames. Lily's father reassured them that everything would be fine, that they had prepared well and the storm would pass. Still, Max could feel Lily's heartbeat quicken against him, her fear growing as the night deepened. He rested his head on her knee, offering the silent comfort that only a loyal pup could provide. Even as the storm outside grew stronger, Max never wavered from her side. His young heart was filled with a determination far beyond his age. He didn't understand the full danger of the blizzard, but he understood this. Lily needed him, and he would not let her down. As the evening wore on, the storm outside showed no signs of slowing. The house creaked under the pressure of the howling wind, and the snow piled so high against the windows that it blocked out nearly all the light. Inside, the family huddled together near the fireplace, bundled in blankets, sipping warm drinks to keep the cold at bay. Max sat alert beside Lily, his ears twitching at every gust and groan. Then came the sudden knock at the door, sharp and urgent, barely audible over the roaring wind. Lily's parents exchanged a worried glance. Visitors during a storm this fierce could only mean trouble. Her father opened the door just a crack against the force of the blizzard, revealing a neighbor bundled tightly in layers of clothing, his face red from the cold and his words hurried. Their elderly neighbors, the Martins, who lived just down the road, were in trouble. Their heater had failed, and with the temperature dropping rapidly, they were in serious danger. Lily's parents knew they had to help. Without hesitation, they bundled themselves in heavy coats and scarves, preparing to brave the storm to bring assistance. Before leaving, Lily's mother knelt down beside her, smoothing Lily's hair back and speaking gently. "Stay here, sweetheart. We won't be long. Keep warm by the fire, and Max will watch over you," she said with a reassuring smile. Lily nodded bravely, though her eyes betrayed her worry. She clung to Max as her parents disappeared into the swirling snow, the door banging shut behind them. Now it was just Lily and Max in the dim, flickering warmth of the fireplace. The house seemed bigger and colder without her parents' presence. Every creak of the walls and every moan of the wind seemed louder, more menacing. Max sensed Lily's unease, and he pressed his body against her, offering silent protection. The minutes stretched on, feeling much longer than they were. Lily tried to be brave, just as her mother had asked. She wrapped herself tighter in her blanket and kept Max close. The blizzard roared louder, shaking the house with a wild fury. Occasionally, the fire would sputter, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Max never left Lily's side. His small body remained planted firmly against hers, his young but sturdy frame a shield between her and the storm. Though he could not understand why her parents had left or what dangers lurked in the freezing world outside, Max knew his job now was more important than ever. He had been trusted with something precious. No matter what happened, he would stay with Lily. He would protect her with everything he had. Time ticked by slowly, and still Lily's parents did not return. The fire, once roaring and bright, began to shrink into a pile of glowing embers. The warmth in the room faded with it, and the cold crept steadily inward, slipping under doors and through cracks in the windows. Max stood up, circling Lily anxiously, sensing her growing fear. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed through the house, causing Lily to jump. The sound came from the back door, the one that led to the shed and woods beyond. Max's ears pricked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Lily clutched the edges of her blanket tighter, her eyes wide. She didn't want to move. She didn't want to leave the dwindling safety of the firelight. But curiosity and a touch of worry pushed her to her feet. With Max pressed tightly against her side, Lily crept through the darkened house. Their footsteps were muffled against the thick rugs, but every sound seemed amplified by the silence around them. When they reached the kitchen, they paused. Another thud shook the door, harder this time. Snow was being pushed in through the tiny cracks, and a gust of frozen wind slipped through, stinging Lily's cheeks. Max stepped forward bravely, planting himself between Lily and the door. His young body trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of his focus. Lily pulled her coat tighter around herself, realizing that if the door gave way, the freezing air would fill the house completely, and they might not be able to stay warm enough to wait for her parents. She needed to do something. Remembering what her father had once told her about staying safe during storms, Lily quickly grabbed the heavy chair and wedged it under the door handle. Max barked once, sharp and loud, as if to encourage her. Together, they worked to push a second chair against the door for extra support. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold for a little while. As they turned to return to the front room, another sound caught their attention, a faint, muffled whimper coming from outside. Lily's heart squeezed painfully. It sounded like a dog, another animal caught in the storm, or worse, someone who needed help. Max was already at the window, his paws on the ledge as he tried to see through the thick curtain of snow. His body was tense, his ears twitching. Whatever was out there, Max was ready to face it. Lily knew they couldn't open the door again, not without risking everything. But she also knew she couldn't ignore someone in trouble. Max turned to her, his eyes wide, pleading. He trusted her to make the choice. Lily hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. The whimper outside grew softer, almost lost beneath the howling wind. Her heart ached at the thought of another creature suffering alone in the blizzard. She looked down at Max, who stared back at her with steady determination, as if urging her to be brave. Taking a deep breath, Lily made a quick decision. She couldn't open the back door where the storm was strongest, but maybe she could slip through the front, just for a moment, to check. Max barked once, as if to say, "Let's do this together." Lily bundled herself up, wrapping a scarf tightly around her face and pulling on her thick mittens. She grabbed the flashlight from the shelf and switched it on, its narrow beam barely cutting through the swirling snow outside the front window. Max stood ready at her side, his little body buzzing with purpose. Slowly, Lily cracked open the front door. The cold hit them like a wave, sharp and bitter, and snow immediately pushed its way in. Max squeezed through the small opening first, his paws sinking into the deep drifts. Lily followed close behind, keeping one hand on the doorknob, not daring to let the door swing fully open. The world outside was a swirling, blinding chaos. Snow whipped against their faces, and the wind howled so loud it was hard to hear anything else. But Max's nose twitched as he caught a scent, and without hesitation, he bounded forward into the snow, staying close enough for Lily to see his dark shape against the white. They only had to go a few feet before Max stopped and barked urgently. Lily stumbled forward, shining her flashlight into the snowbank where Max was digging frantically. There, half buried and trembling, was a tiny bundle of fur, a stray puppy, no bigger than Max himself, shivering and weak. Without thinking, Lily scooped the puppy into her arms. It was so cold, she could feel it even through her thick mittens. Max barked again, leading the way back to the house, his body cutting a small path through the snow for Lily to follow. Once safely inside, Lily shut the door against the storm and dropped to her knees by the fire, cradling the small puppy against her chest. Max hovered beside them, wagging his tail anxiously. The stray whimpered softly, but its eyes fluttered open, drawn to the warmth. Lily rubbed it gently, trying to get its blood flowing again. Max leaned in, licking the puppy's tiny ears, his actions full of care. Together in the flickering firelight, Lily and Max fought to keep the little life alive. Even in the middle of the storm, hope flickered with them. The storm raged even harder as night fully set in, rattling the windows and howling through every crack in the walls. The fire, now carefully fed by Lily with the last of the wood, burned low but steady. The room was dim and chilly, but it was their only island of warmth in the middle of the freezing storm. Lily sat close to the fire, wrapping herself, Max, and the tiny rescued puppy in every blanket she could find. The puppy, still weak, nestled deeper into the warmth, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Max stayed right beside it, his body acting as a shield, sharing his body heat without hesitation. He nudged the puppy gently with his nose from time to time, making sure it stayed awake and breathing. Lily's heart swelled with pride as she watched Max. Though he was still just a young pup himself, he had taken charge without fear. His loyalty and bravery filled her with a strength she hadn't realized she had. She stroked Max's fur and whispered, "You're the best boy, Max. The bravest boy in the whole world." As the hours dragged on, the temperature inside the house dropped even lower. Ice began to creep along the inside of the windows, and their breath fogged the air. Lily shivered, pulling the blankets tighter around her. She knew she needed to stay awake to keep feeding the fire and checking on the puppy, but the cold was making her eyelids heavy. Max sensed her struggle. He stood up, shook the snow from his fur, and barked softly, nuzzling her face. His bright eyes told her, "Stay strong." Lily smiled weakly and sat up straighter, adding another small log to the fire from the pile her father had left. Suddenly, there was a loud cracking noise from outside. A tree limb, heavy with snow, had snapped and fallen. The whole house seemed to tremble. Lily jumped, clutching the puppy closer. Max stood firm, his body tense but ready. His instincts were clear. Protect, stay close, don't let fear take over. The storm was testing them with everything it had, but inside that little room by the stubborn little fire, a bond stronger than the winds outside was growing. Lily, Max, and the tiny rescued pup leaned into one another, finding strength in their togetherness. No matter how fierce the night became, they would not face it alone. Max had made sure of that. In the heart of the storm, a new family was being forged, one act of bravery, one heartbeat at a time. The night dragged on, hour after hour, each minute stretching into what felt like eternity. Lily fought hard to stay awake, resting her head lightly against Max's back for support. The rescued puppy lay snug between them, now breathing more steadily, its tiny body no longer shivering quite as much. Outside, the wind still howled, but there was a slight change in its tone, less fierce, more distant. Max stirred first, lifting his head and perking his ears toward the window. A faint gray light was beginning to seep through the frost-covered glass. Dawn was coming. Lily blinked her heavy eyes open and realized that somehow they had made it through the worst. She stretched her stiff legs and looked down at Max, who wagged his tail slowly and licked her hand as if to say, "We did it." Relief washed over her, bringing tears to her eyes that she quickly wiped away. The puppy, feeling the movement, gave a tiny yawn and wriggled a little deeper into the blankets. Lily smiled warmly. Though small and weak, the puppy had survived the terrible storm thanks to Max's bravery and their shared determination. Suddenly, the sound of an engine hummed faintly through the quiet. Lily's heart leaped. She scrambled to her feet, careful not to disturb the puppy too much, and hurried to the window. Peering through the frosty glass, she saw the familiar outline of her parents' truck, its headlights piercing through the morning mist. "They're back, Max," she cried, her voice hoarse but joyful. Max barked happily, spinning in a small circle before dashing to the door. Lily wrapped the puppy carefully in a blanket and followed. She unlatched the door and pulled it open, letting in a rush of cold air and a few stray snowflakes. Her parents rushed inside, their faces lined with worry that quickly turned into pure relief at the sight of her. "Lily," her mother cried, pulling her into a fierce hug. Her father knelt beside Max, ruffling the pup's ears and praising him warmly. Between tears and laughter, Lily explained everything: the falling branch, the near-freezing house, and the tiny life they had saved. Her parents listened closely, their eyes shining with pride. As they all sat together by the rekindled fire, with Max lying protectively beside the rescued puppy, Lily realized something she would carry with her forever. True bravery wasn't about being fearless. It was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about standing strong even when the storm was at its fiercest. And in her heart, she knew Max had been her true hero all along. The world outside had transformed overnight. What was once a raging blizzard had become a calm white wonderland. The trees sparkled with ice crystals, and the heavy blanket of snow stretched untouched across the fields. Inside the little house, warmth and hope blossomed. Lily sat near the fire, cradling the tiny puppy in her arms, while Max rested beside her, his head on her lap. Her parents, relieved to have made it home safely, moved about the house, tidying up and checking for any damage the storm might have caused. The little puppy, now gaining strength, wiggled his small paws in his sleep, causing Lily to laugh softly. Max thumped his tail against the floor in approval, protective and proud of his new little brother. Lily's heart was full. She had never felt so much gratitude for the safety of her family, for Max's bravery, and for the tiny life they had saved together. Later in the morning, Lily's father announced that the main road had been cleared enough to drive slowly into town. They bundled up the puppy, tucked securely in a soft blanket, and headed to the veterinarian's office. Max rode alongside them, his eyes alert, checking on his little companion from time to time. At the vet, the news was good. The puppy was underweight but healthy, thanks to Max's warmth and Lily's quick thinking. The vet praised them all for their courage and kindness, and suggested a few steps to help the little one grow strong. Before they left, Lily asked the most important question of all. Can we keep him? Her parents exchanged a glance, then smiled warmly. He's already home, don't you think? Her mother said. On the drive back, they tossed around name ideas. Snowy, Frost, Lucky. All seemed fitting. But it wasn't until they pulled into their driveway, and Lily watched Max and the puppy sitting side by side, that the perfect name came to her. Brave, she said. We'll call him Brave. The puppy seemed to perk up at the sound of his new name, and Max barked once as if to seal the decision. Brave. It was perfect for the little soul who had survived the coldest night, and for the family who had come together to save him. As days turned into weeks, Brave grew stronger, and he and Max became best friends. Wherever one went, the other followed. They shared food, toys, and long naps under the warm sun. Together, they reminded Lily every single day, even after the fiercest storms, love and courage could create the brightest new beginnings.